right. Well, hello, everyone. And this is Aleks Paunic, or as they would say in the United States, Aleks Paunic. And welcome to another edition, event, a show, if you will, that is dealing with the fact that a lot of you guys are trying to expand in the United States and American market. And today we wanted to talk about procurement. We wanted to talk about what happens actually when you close your first deal in United States. So let me just go back there and spend a minute to thank USAID Digital Serbia started and the venture and idea for inviting me yet again here. Then beautiful office, modern office, so started in Belgrade. And again, we want to talk about, what happens when you close your first deal in the United States, right? What really needs to happen on your end between you and the customer before you actually see the money, right? Show me the money. There is that certain steps and preparation and operational excellence that has to happen from that moment when you present and you pitch and you do a demo and your customer says, we love what we're seeing. We want to go with you guys. Well, you still have to do certain things to make sure that they're taking place before you actually see the money, or as they would say in Serbia, before you send a factura, or in US when you send an invoice and actually see that revenue. So we want to make sure that you guys understand that. We talked about in the previous class or event what to do, to get to that point, to sell properly and successfully in the United States. But now we want to talk a little bit more about the procurement and the steps there need to be in place. So again, show me the money is actually when I do these presentations, I was encouraged by started and a lot of you guys providing me feedback, and thanks for contacting me on LinkedIn. I'll show my LinkedIn address that you do like some of the American culture that I bring to you. So show me the money is a pretty famous slang or saying that appeared in a movie, Jerry Maguire, Tom Cruise, and it was actually said by Cuba Gooding Jr. He was an American football player that got tired of the promises by his agent, but where at one point he said, listen, words are nice, but you got to show me the money, Jerry. And in America, people like to reference movies. There's a lot of references when it comes to slang. They're drawn from the popular cultural movies. So show me the money is one of the things that you're going to hear quite often. And it means like words are cheap, where's the money? And that's what we want to show you guys today, how to make sure that you transition from a successful demo to actually providing that invoice or factura and getting that revenue. So again, piggybacking on that idea, I have a quote here actually from Mr. Peterson. He was my finance teacher. I went to a private school in Denver, Colorado. And there's actually a couple of stories here. Mr. Peterson, my professor, and this is, going actually a little bit back, in 90s. But a couple of stories here. American school system is pretty cool in a sense where a lot of your teachers actually had a real life experience in a subject that they're teaching about. And my major was business administration, and I was blessed to have a lot of teachers that were actually teaching what they were living, right? So it makes a whole world of difference. And in this case, I had a finance class. This was my senior year. Mr. Peterson was somebody who had multiple businesses, and he taught us about very basic and very complex things, from how to open a bank account to how to get a credit, lines of credit, but also how to be a successful entrepreneur. And I remember, this is actually, he's saying one of the papers that he gave us, he said, we got to be politically correct. There's actually a slang in US, it ain't over till the fat lady sings, which is used in sporting events, or, it kind of means the slang, it's not over yet, right? We didn't finish the crossing line. But he said, we got to be politically correct. And you cannot say a fat lady. So you got to say, it ain't over until gravitationally challenged lady sings. So in this case, Mr. Peterson was also saying a similar thing that we want to talk about today. even if you have a good demo, even if your a customer says like, this is great, we want to go with you guys, it's still ain't over, because you got to see that revenue. And you got to take some steps that we're going to talk about today to make sure that you can have a successful relationship and realize revenue with that relationship. Hopefully I'm not being boring with this slide, because I'm sure we have some repeating audience members, but we also have some new ones. So I do want to get a second here to introduce myself, who is Aleks Paunic, or in US, as they would say, Aleks Paunic. I was born in Novi Sad. I lived in the United States for 30 plus years. I actually kind of live between Florida, Tampa Bay, which I call home, and New York, but I often make my way to Serbia. And right now, again, I'm at Started office. We do have, some, business and engineering interest in Serbia, my company. But again, I went to a U.S. high school system, college, and then I joined corporate America in early 2000. And I worked, for various companies, but my IT or cybersecurity journey started with MX Logic, excuse me, back in 2007, where, we were doing what was called, email spam filtering, or at that time, it was becoming really popular to have a software as a service SaaS product. And this company got attracted a lot of big companies. So this small cybersecurity startups in Denver, Colorado, at that time with about 150 employees, attracted the likes of McAfee's, right? Everybody knows McAfee, global cybersecurity provider. So we got bought by McAfee. So I started working for McAfee, right? Started with MX Logic, as you can see on the right, that's my MX Logic t-shirt. But then, I started working for McAfee, and then Intel bought McAfee, for a massive deal in 2010 for $7.6 billion. So I went from working for a small startup, 150 employees, which was growing, but then started working for a global company like McAfee, and then worked for a Fortune 10 company, Intel. My job was always in sales, right? So if you're asking about my credibility, it's in sales, but in very specific manner, which we're probably going to have a workshop and event. It's regarding the channel of distribution, which is very important. If you want to make your way to US market, you should definitely have a strategy how to sell directly to your customers, but also how to sell through partners or distributors, and how to build a lucrative and complex and profitable channel. That was not enough for me. I decided to take a little bit more risk with my colleague from McAfee, David DeBerry. Shout out to David. And we started PreCog Security back in 2017. We are doing security risk assessment, penetration testing, reverse engineering, but we're also doing compliance and compliance readiness. And we're also, building a game. I'm going to talk about it a little bit in future events. Game for the cybersecurity, right? We want to gamify and simplify cybersecurity through a very cool concept and platform. I'm also a member, or better yet, the chapter lead for Serbian entrepreneurs. I am very active in our Florida chapter. That's where I manage, the relationship with the Serbian startups. They're coming to US and want to present in Miami, but I also have a great relationship with New York and Toronto and San Francisco chapters. Very interesting thing, working very closely with Started on that. That's how I met Vukashin, actually, in Miami. But when the COVID thing, goes away a little bit and companies started to travel and start to travel, would love to talk to you guys how I can help you do presentations and have successful meetings in US. So that's another thing that I do. And because of that, I noticed that there is a massive need for business development for Serbian companies that are expanding to US, right? My observation is that we have incredible engineering, incredible innovation prowess, and very talented people that are, slowly transitioning from not just doing outsourcing, but building product. And everybody wants to attack a US market. That's what we are talking about. But again, my experience is that somehow we are lacking operational knowledge, maybe sales and business development knowledge that some other companies from other regions have, like Israel, Scandinavia. And that's what we're doing here, right? We're trying to get you guys ready for US market. So your engineering is already ahead, but we want to make sure that your operational sales and marketing readiness is up to par with your engineering skills and innovation skills. So again, expect a lot of these events. You know, I'm glad to do it. And hopefully this is useful and valuable to you. Okay, enough about me. Let's talk about the agenda for today. So I do want to just go back into the sales cycle a little bit, just make sure that everybody understands the steps. But most of the time, I want to spend about that procurement, right? And invoicing, like show me the money. That's the theme here, right? We are assuming that you understand the sales cycle. So I will touch on a couple of steps that are very critical. But I do want to go a little bit deeper into procurement, some of the documentations, some of the back and forth that you're going to have with operational, you know, perhaps legal teams from your clients. And then how do you collect that money? How do you make sure that you're paid? Because you guys need to get paid. You need to pay your suppliers, you need to pay your employees, and you need to supply your, hopefully, you know, research and development departments with that revenue. Okay. This is an important disclaimer, and I probably wanted to have that even last time. But again, what we are doing here, we're giving you a general overview of the process, okay? We cannot, I mean, just the presentation today, which is going to be about 1 hour. I should have done a housekeeping here to explain that. This presentation alone could be easily a workshop that for 30 days, right? So there's a lot of topics here that I'm going to try to cover, but basically what we're doing is we're still giving you some kind of overview if you never had an experience with U.S. markets and you know, understanding what you need to do after the sale is done. This is amazing information, right? But each one of these topics that we're going to cover, it could be a workshop, you know, for a day. So I just wanted to let you know, this is still general, right? There's still a lot of detail, or as they would say in the US, the devil is in the detail, right? But the next two things that I want to mention is very important, right? I still, after this presentation, even if you have a better idea what you have to do when it comes to documentation, on taxes and legal documents, I still need you to go to your tax expert, right? You have a client in US, you're ready to go, right? I want to make sure that, yes, you're getting some general knowledge from myself and this presentation, but you still want to talk to your tax expert. You're still going to get a general knowledge about some of the legal ramifications of doing business in the US, but I still need you to talk to your legal expert before you pull the trigger, before you send that invoice, before you start filling out some of the documentation. Okay, so I just want to make sure that that is clear. The last thing we want to hear is somebody come in and saying like, well, Alex said it and started, you know, had a presentation, so I've done it. We definitely want to give you the knowledge, but we also encourage you to, before you do the final steps in some of these engagements, consult the tax experts as well as the legal experts. Okay, that's out of the way. Let's get into it. So sales cycle, closing the deal. Again, you know, it's just not going to spend time here. This was the last presentation that we had last month. You guys can actually access these through YouTube. You're like, oh, this is interesting. I wanna hear more about that. We actually have this saved, so please reach out to us. You know, we'll give you the link. Again, this is your sales cycle. More than happy, you know, to answer any of the sales cycle steps. But you know, just want to make sure that that's covered. That you guys understand. You know, it's obviously complex. Sales cycle, whether it's in Europe or in US, they're pretty similar. But I did wanted to kind of touch base what you guys can do to make sure that you're putting yourself in the best position to win the deal and then transition through procurement. If I would pick 2 steps, they're super critical. They're going to ensure that you are going to be closing a lot of deals. Number 1, again, assess the need. We talked about that. You really have to understand your client's problems. You have to understand their friction. You have to listen. Selling is listening, making sure that you're, you know, finding ways to fix their problem. You know, selling is really listening, understanding the friction, understanding the problem, and fixing it. And then the second one, this is a segue to what we're going to talk about a lot today, is that even though you're doing a presentation, you didn't get a final yes, let's go, we're sold on your product, we want to work with you, I still want to encourage you to start thinking about and transitioning to procurement, okay? Because the last thing, and I've seen it happen, you know, the last thing you want to do is you do an amazing job building a product or positioning your service, because in this audience, we have people that are positioning service, some people are positioning the product. Either way, we want to avoid the situation. You want to avoid the situation where you did such an amazing job presenting your product and service. You do your demo, you do a proof of concept, your client said, this is great, we're ready to go. And then you're not ready for procurement, right? You do not want to have that lag, because, you know, it's definitely going to hurt getting that revenue, but it's also going to hurt you in a sense where you can damage the relationship with your client, where your operational readiness is not there, and you don't want your client to think like, wow, okay, they're not ready, they're really not ready for us, you know, and then they see some kind of potential problem or a red flag. So start transitioning procurement and start making sure that you have all the documents, or as we say in the US, all the ducks in a row, right? So that means like you're putting together what kind of documents should I have if this deal goes through. Start working on that early. Okay, so this is where I want to spend most of the time during this presentation, right? So you close the deal, and what does that mean? You did a presentation, your client said, this is great, right? We're ready to go. Maybe you do a proof of concept, but then your client's going to say, okay, now we have to engage our internal procurement teams, okay? So what does that mean? Let's take a step back. There is a lot of times, you know, sometimes you're going to work a direct deal with a customer, right? There is really no any kind of what we're going to talk about here, request for proposal and request for quote, right? Client came directly to you, said, listen, we need a quote for this, we need a service, we're not talking to anybody else, or maybe we're talking to another company, and you're just dealing directly with them. But sometimes client is going to be like, even after the demo, they might say like, okay, listen, this is great, but we do have official request for proposal or request for quote, right? Sometimes you're going to see those. And basically, this is a bidding platform or bidding environment where client is saying like, look, we want all the interested vendors, service providers to submit a quote and a proposal, okay? So RFP and RFQ, those are the abbreviations, acronyms, as we would say, for request for proposal, request for quote. Let's talk about the difference between those two. RFP, it's a request for proposal, meaning, yes, they do need a quote, but they also have to understand a little bit about your formal process. And typically, you're going to see this when they're looking for service provider. They're looking for solution builder, right? So it's not clearly super defined exactly, you know, what exactly they need. They do have a really strong idea, but you will have to spend a little bit of time to build that proposal. Again, this is typically for the IT outsourcing. The request for proposal, little issue with that I see is it takes time to build it, right? You have to really put some resources, time, and effort to build that. And I'm sure you guys seen that before. I just want to make sure that that's clear. At the end of the day, you know, request for proposal is going to have some kind of timeline. It's going to have extensive information about your credibility, the background of the people. You know, it's a little bit of a project management and business plan at once, but again, it's going to finish with a quote. Again, the pros is typically these are very lucrative contracts. You can, if you win it, you're in. You know, you're going to make a lot of money. You're going to see a lot of revenue, but the cons, as we say, the problem with that is it's risky. You can spend all that time, and at the end of the day, you do not win the deal, okay? Request for quote is actually way simpler. Client knows exactly what they want, and again, this is typically for a product, or maybe it's for a service when it's clearly defined. Let's say if it's for a service, they're going to say like, hey, we need 5 programmers, you know, senior Java or Python developers. You know, here's the timeline, here's how many hours, you know, we just need a quote. We just need the pricing. We don't need anything else. It's very quick. You can send a quote, or it's for a product like, hey, we need a product, you know, specific SaaS product, you know, that's, you know, solving a particular problem, giving us a solution. what is the quote, what is the, how is the licensing structured? Again, very easy to do that. You know, the risk is, yeah, you still might not get the deal, but you do not spend as much time. So again, just want to be clear between those two. If you win it, right, what happens next? You enter that procurement. So you will, so let's say your client, maybe you did a bid, request for proposal, request for quota. Maybe you did a direct deal with the customer. You found the customer, you did a demo, you presented it. They're like, yeah, we're ready to go. You do have to have some kind of contract in place. I'm pretty sure this is basic stuff. You know, I see the same kind of process in Serbia and Europe, you know, but just want to make sure we cover the bases here. There's different ways, you know, how we call this, you know, personally, we call it at my cybersecurity company, professional service agreement, because we provide services. But you know, you're going to see a few names floating out there. They all lead to the same thing. Somebody is signing off on something that they're going to, you know, purchase your services, right? You do have stakeholders, you know, timelines are defined, scope is defined. And you have this contract now in place that you're like, okay, these guys, not only that they said, yes, we're going to go with your product, now I put the contract in front of them, you know, they signed it. So you're almost there, right? You're getting closer to see that invoice, factura, and revenue. So this definitely has to take place. You know, I gave you guys a sample. You can find a lot of these samples and templates. They're all a little bit different, but they all lead to one. There's going to be some basic information about your company, basic information about your buyer, client, and then you will start defining, like I said, the scope, a timeline, and definitely what kind of service or product is going to be provided. Okay, so this is kind of big. When W9 or W8 ban are actually the forms where, you know, your client is going to say inside a procurement, you know, you're not going to be working probably with people that you actually presented. If it's a bigger company, they obviously have internal teams, operational teams, you know, accounting and whatnot, that are going to reach out to you, and they will say something like, okay, we need you to fill out W9. That's for the US companies. If you have a US entity, they want to know you're a real company, right? So you did a good job presenting. There is a service agreement that your client signed, but now their accounting wants to say like, okay, are you a real company, right? And if you have a US entity, you will have to fill out the basic information, you know, your company's name, legal name. You will have to fill out the address. You will have to fill out what's called the federal ID number. If you have an entity in US, you have to have that. Like a lot of companies in Serbia are doing the C Corp in Delaware. As soon as you do that, or whether you open it in Florida or Texas or California, you will get the federal ID number. That's what you put on W9. However, you might say, Alex, we do not have an entity in US yet, or never. Or, well, at that point, you know, you will have to fill out what's called the W8 ban. W8 ban, there are two forms of W8 ban. There is, if you're individual providing services, let's say you're a programmer, freelancer, you have a great relationship with a US client, they will send you W8 ban for an individual. If you're an entity, W8 ban E for an entity. You will have to fill that out. Why is this important? Well, you might be liable for up to 30% taxes. And, you know, some of you guys might know, but I wanted to make sure that I'm up to date as well. Serbia and US, we do not, Serbia and US do not have a tax treaty, right? The latest information I found, there's some discussions, negotiations going between US and Serbia. Perhaps, you know, one of the, you know, future events that we have, we're going to say, hey, great news, you know, there's a tax treaty between US and Serbia to avoid the double taxation. But right now, there's no such treaty. That's why you have to treat this form W8 ban seriously if you don't have a US entity, because you do not want to be liable for 30% taxes. Again, I do want you to go to your legal experts, but at the same time, you know, nothing to it. It's fairly simple, especially if you're in the individual. But again, even if your entity, you know, it's a little longer form. For the individual, it's like really one page. For entities, you know, it's a little bit more pages. But again, your client, your customer in US wants to make sure that you're a real company. Okay. one more piece of advice I would give: if you're doing business with a U.S. Entity, a U.S. company, and you do not have your own U.S. entity, and your client does not mention W-8 ban, I would definitely advise you to mention it to them, right? It is kind of a gray area who really needs to put it in front of you. You know, most of the times, I would say that your client is going to put that in front of you. But if you didn't see one, I think you should ask them, hey, I want to be forefront with you. And since I don't have a U.S. entity, do you have a W-8 ban, or if your entity, W-8 ban E form for me, and see what they say. A lot of times they're going to say, oh, well, thanks for reminding us. Yeah, we actually need you to sign that. So take initiative, make sure that that's in place. But again, this has to happen. W-9 if you have a U.S. entity, and W-8 ban if you don't have one. Okay, so that takes place, those two forms. And then the next one is, all right, well, your U.S. client wants to make sure that you're registered internally. Okay, this is really a sheet, the supplier form, this is really a sheet for their accounting. Because you're going to be sending an invoice, and somebody over there internally is going to be like, okay, where's this invoice coming from? Who are these people? Who is this vendor? It has to be registered, right? It's not going to get registered from that contract that you have, and it's not going to get registered just for the W-8 ban, right? It's going to get registered from the supplier form. And maybe I should have flipped this around. I think sometimes you get those two forms, supplier form and the W-9 or W-8 ban together, but supplier form probably is going to be a little bit before that, because they want to know, hey, let's get your basic information for our accounting, because when you send an invoice, somebody has to be like, where's this invoice coming from? Oh, okay, we have this vendor supplier registered, and we can actually proceed to pay for their invoice. This is a very important form for multiple reasons. Obviously, you're getting your basic information. There's going to be a mention of your company, address, but one big thing, this is where your selling does not stop. There's going to be net terms discussed on this form, or actually offered on this form, okay? So my suggestion to you is to start talking about net terms even in your contract, right? I'm sure that you guys have experience even working in Serbia or European companies where you know, the rule of thumb is the larger the company, the more they're going to prolong the payment. They're going to look at the net payments, you know, probably like at least 30, but maybe even 60 or 90 days, meaning you send them an invoice, well, they're going to wait 90 days to pay you if they're big. If you strike a deal with, you know, companies like Walmart or Disney, I can promise you, when you send an invoice, they're not going to pay right away. You know, they have, you know, the way they're structured, they're like, okay, we have net 60 or net 90 terms for you. But this is still a chance to negotiate, right? And if you guys just leave it to your customer and your client for them to pick the terms, obviously they're going to pick the terms that they work for them. So make sure that you have some kind of negotiation, even in a professional services agreement, and making sure when you do that supplier form, it kind of matches what was already discussed. And then we're going to see the invoice again, your invoice matches those net terms. Some kind of rule of thumb, again, is if you're providing simple services, you know, basic services, it's not, you know, maybe, you know, 4 figures or 5 figures, you know, we'll talk about that. You know, you can have short net terms. You can have it what we call a cash on delivery due on receipt. I send you an invoice, you have to pay right away. And sometimes you just have to wait one more sales cycle. And we'll talk about that in a minute. But again, you will have to do a supplier form no matter, you know, the business you're dealing with. Okay, this is probably my favorite topic, and this is what we say as a slang, right up my wheelhouse, you know, a little bit of security and compliance. So what we're seeing here is vendor risk assessment, security and compliance, and this form is fairly new. We are seeing this appearing for the last few years. And what does this mean? Well, security, as you know, and cybersecurity is becoming very important. If you were doing business, even in the United States, you know, 10 years ago, if you would sell your service to Facebook or Walmart or Disney 10 years ago, You would go to your sales cycle, you know, you still have to, you know, sell it. You have to do supplier form. You have to do your W-9 or W-8 and that's it, right? You figure out the net terms, you send an invoice. But before that all happens, now, because of security, because of a lot of breaches, because of the ransomware attacks, because we see that the supply chain is actually very vulnerable to attacks, meaning big companies spend a lot of money on security, but hackers and criminals know, like, hey, I'm not going to attack you directly. I'm just going to go inside your supply chain through one of your vendors and access, you know, data through them. So big companies figured out, wow, you know, we not only have to protect ourselves, we have to protect our supply chain. So they were thinking, well, how are we going to do that? And they said, well, you know, we live and adhere to certain security standards as a Fortune 500 company or even Fortune 2000 companies. We're going to make sure that every vendor that we do business with adhere, aligns, and follows those same standards. Okay, so that means that you do all that supplier form, you do that WA band, and they will say something. Oh, okay, great. Just one more thing, and it's a big thing. You have to get approved by our data governance, legal, and security team. And you're like, wow, what does that mean? What do I have to do? You're going to get what's called a third-party vendor risk assessment questionnaire. You're going to get close to 100 questions, sometimes even more. And sometimes, you know, they're going to put you through inside the software to start filling these things out. Your client wants to know, especially if you're selling a SaaS, this is definitely, if you're selling SaaS to American companies, you're definitely going to have to do this. They want to know, how do you treat security? Like, is this product secure? Are you testing it? Where are you storing data? Your client is going to say, like, look, you're touching some very critical data of ours. You know, we want to make sure it's protected. And it's not just a questionnaire. They will also ask you to supply the documents and show them that you're really doing it. It's not just like, oh, yeah, we do that. Okay, prove it to me. I talked recently to a Fortune 100 security people and the data governance people, and I asked them, hey, what if there's a company that has an amazing product and they do a demo for you, a proof of concept, and there's an executive that really likes the product, but they don't have security controls in place. They're like, we're not going to approve it. And I'm like, what does that mean? I said, we're just not going to use the product. We're never going to pay for it. It's too much risk for us. Even if the product is great, if there's no security in place, we're not going to use it. So my advice to you guys, whether you're doing services, and especially if you're doing SaaS, start thinking about what kind of security controls we have in place. And as a matter of fact, I talked to the started people, what we're going to do, and this is going to be one call to action, we're going to give you free and no cost a blank vendor risk, security risk questionnaire. You can have it and you can start filling it out and start figuring out where do you lack in security. But again, they want to know, how do you protect the data? Are you testing your product? You know, do you do background checks for your people? Access control? Do you have business continuity, disaster recovery? What if you're under attack? How long before your service is up? So those things are incredibly important now. And I can only tell you, they're going to be even more important. We do have clients on the PreCog Security side that we would tell them about these forms. And they're like, oh, okay, well, you know, we'll worry about that later. And then they come to us and they literally say, we landed a big client. And you're right. You know, they're asking us to fill out this questionnaire. We don't have these things in place. This is where my company, PreCog Security, helps. Actually, we help people build this literally if they have nothing, from 0 to 1 or even 0 to 3. I just want to do a quick housekeeping. Should have done it at the beginning. Please send us questions. You know, I'm going to be answering these, you know, once the presentation is done. And we're going to, at the end of the presentation, we're going to do a quick bio break, you know, for maybe 2-3 minutes. But don't hesitate to start sending questions. I'm going to try to answer all of those after the presentation is done. So I already see some questions there. I'm going to definitely get to them. Stick around. We're going to try to do those probably around 6:03, you know, right after this presentation is done. Okay, as you guys can see, I'm super passionate about this topic. And like I said, we'll work with the started staff to make sure that you have this questionnaire. And it's a real live questionnaire that one of our cybersecurity clients got it from a Fortune 500 company. Obviously, we erased all the names of the companies, but the questions are real, and we are seeing those same questions over and over. They're kind of borrowed from few security standards like, ISO 27001, NIST 853. Okay, enough about security. You guys are probably getting a little bit bored, but I'm definitely passionate about it, as you can see. All right. So now let's talk about the invoicing and show me the money, right? How do we get that money? How do we get that revenue? And how do we make sure that you guys are getting paid? You're doing such a good job building a product, providing a service, but now it's time to send that invoice. So I do want to clarify a couple of things. In Serbia they say factura, right? And I'm going to ask a question and see if you guys want to answer it. But what do you think between the purchase order and invoice? What's an American factura? Just think about it for a second, right? When I deal with Serbian companies, I hear a lot like, oh, we want to send that factura, and that's that piece of document that you're trying to get to a client and you're hoping that you get paid. So you're almost home. All right, giving up. All right, did you take your pick? Purchase order or invoice? Factura is actually invoice, right? What's a purchase order? Purchase order, sometimes you're going to see it. Basically, purchase order comes, you do your contract, you do some of the forms, and your client says like, all right, we see the signed contract, we see this is a real company, right? We see the W-9 or W-8 band, we see a supplier form. Well, we definitely want the service, and we want to make sure that we show our vendor, our service provider, that we are counting on these services. So this is a contract between them and you that you're going to have to provide those services where the pricing and net terms are already in place. You're probably not going to see purchase orders for smaller deals, but for most of the medium-sized or large deals, you will see that. They're going to itemize, the product and the services that you're doing, right? And you're expected to deliver it because they can hold you liable for it. So purchase order, the client is sending it to you, but then, and this is a great thing because it shows you your client internally is counting on these services to be delivered. When you send an invoice, you want to make sure it matches that purchase order, okay? If there's no purchase order in place, you can still send an invoice, right? Based on the terms that were defined in your contract and then on the supplier form. Again, invoice is factura, and this is that last step before you get paid. You're sending that to your client, and you're hoping that you had all your ducks in a row, all your documents in a row, that their accounting team, once they get an invoice, they're going to be like, okay, we got a invoice from the company ABC. Let's find ABC in a supplier database. Okay, this is a supplier. Everything looks good, right? They signed the W-9 or W-8 band. Great, it's time to get them paid. What are the net terms? They're going to look at the net terms. Okay, so invoice, purchase order, again, invoice is that last step that you need to do, the last piece of document that you need to send to your client before you get paid. And perhaps, let me just go back. Some of you guys are thinking, okay, how do I send that? You guys obviously are no strangers sending that, but if you have a U.S. entity, there is some amazing software, for small to medium-sized businesses like QuickBooks. It's very popular in the U.S. It gives you a very professional and customized way to send invoicing. And in America, they never stop just with an invoice. There's always additional services, creating a great email, customized email, putting your logo. I can't stress enough, how important that is. I remember, again, having a class, back in college, and our professor said, like, when you send an invoice, it's not just like, hey, give me the money, but this is also a chance for you to present the value to your client, to show how professional you are. Hey, if you're smart and if you're salesy, maybe you're going to put a nice note in that invoice. Maybe you're going to tell them about the upcoming, specials, some other value that you can provide. So treat these invoices not just like, hey, give me this money because I provided you product and a service, but also a chance for you to, maybe wish them happy holidays, tell them a little bit about your services, and use it as collecting the money, but also a good sales tool. Okay, so net terms, here's the glossary. I have a bunch of terms here, when it comes to when you want to define the net terms. But probably I want to spend just time on a couple. This is what we use at PreCog Security. So basically, you have, there's some acronyms and abbreviations like PIA, payment in advance. You could ask for money in advance. Sometimes that's used maybe, if you find that there's a risky deal or it's a massive deal, you need some down payment, you can definitely ask for that. But typically what we see here is the net terms are defined in your supplier form, in your contract. And I would say the most popular one, kind of like a default one, is net 30, right? Your client's going to pay you when you send an invoice after 30 days, right? They're going to wait for the sales cycle and then send you that revenue, send you that cash, pay your invoice in 30 days. But you can negotiate anywhere from 7 days, 10, 15. Again, your client, the bigger the client, they're going to try to push it and extend the payment, even to 90 days. I did deals, when I was back in the day, with McAfee Intel, with the Department of Defense in US, with Walmarts and Disney's. And, typically those are structured, definitely paying it, down the road and, in stage payments. Sometimes I'm going to talk about it in a second. The other one that's really popular that we use, especially for like a little smaller deals, we call that cash on delivery, right? And this is also known as due on receipt. You send an invoice and you say, hey, you have to pay it as soon as you see that invoice. Sometimes they're going to wait for their accounting cycle. Let's say you send it in now, cash on delivery, they're probably going to wait March 1st to pay it. But you also have end of the month, right? So you can add that. For the larger deals, this is typically normal. You're going to have to do what we see are stage payments, right? There are set payments over the period of time. A lot of these larger deals are structured, in a more complex way, that they're paid over the 2 or 3, or even sometimes 5-year periods of time. Like I said, you could also get creative. There is some rebates that you can offer to the clients. Typically, I see those being offered to those clients. They're, paying on time. Or maybe you have a software as a service license. Maybe you offer some incentives when the payments are covered in time, or maybe in advance, so they can get a little cash back. You can get really creative and use those net terms in your advantage to, to make your client not just liable, but to make them loyal to your service and to your product. All right. Well, you're sending these invoices, and you define the net terms, and maybe it's, like we said, cash on delivery, due on receipt. You send it today, and it's March 1st, and it's March 3rd, and the invoice and the revenue is not coming. Or you define a net 30, and it's been 60 days or 90 days, and you never got that invoice paid. It happens. I would like to think, I talk to a lot of companies that deal with global clients, and I ask them, who do you like to, and companies in Europe, who do you like to work with the most? And often I hear, we like to work with Americans. They typically follow the deadlines, and they do pay on time. But, it happens, and I've seen it happen, where the client is, we call that delinquent a client or account, meaning they did not pay in time. So what do you do when that happens? Let's just start. I gave you a cycle here and some steps, but I'm going to start probably with the step number 3 or 4. Don't get angry, don't get frustrated, don't yell at your customer. Number one, let's see how we escalate this, right? The payment is not here. You send an invoice, the payment is not here. You're worried, right? And you didn't get any kind of communication from your client. Okay, this is the worst case scenario, right? No call, no show. You don't know what's going on. Definitely start with a follow-up with an email, right? That's your first thing. You're following up with maybe you have a contact from accounting, the contact from engineering, whoever you sold the service. just, with a very nice way, you can actually remind them. Some of those services that I told you, they're automated, the software services for invoicing. They have a very nice tool that you can set a soft reminder, right? It's not like, hey, you got to pay me, but it's like, hey, maybe you forgot, just a reminder that we didn't receive a payment. So that's your first step, right? You want to follow up with an email. You have to wait maybe a little bit before you actually take a phone and make a dial and call your client in person over the phone. Americans see that as a very serious thing. So I would say wait when you send that first email reminding them, because you might as well get an email back. Oh, we're so sorry, this got lost in the shuffle. A person that was handling in accounting this account, they're no longer here, or they're on a they're sick or maternity leave or something like that. Give them a chance to resolve internally. You send an email, nothing is happening still. That's probably wait a few days. If you don't see any movement, pick up a call and call. Americans going to see when you call as really, okay, this is serious, right? I have a vendor supplier that's calling me. Americans don't like typically receiving a phone call. There's a lot of jokes going around in the States, like, oh, somebody's calling me, like it has to be something super serious. Yes, so use that phone call to say, hey, this is serious. We just want to make sure everything is okay. Again, even on that phone call, do not yell, do not threaten your customer, right? Your job is to collect the money, right? You want to make sure that you get paid. So, and you don't want to sever the relationship with your client. Maybe your client just having a rough time or something like that. You want to see if you can preserve that relationship. But definitely call them, be direct, be honest, be transparent, and ask for your money. Make sure you reference the contract, make sure you reference the invoice, and make sure that you reference the deliverable that you've done, and ask for your money. Now, again, don't threaten, and we're going step by step here, right? You make that phone call, they maybe accept it, or it goes to the voicemail, or you're not getting a favorable results, right? Even if they took a call, you see that there's no movement over the next period. You want to start making some kind of business decision. Okay, I still want to collect the money, and I still want them as a customer. Maybe your business decision is, you know what? They owe us $10,000. Maybe we can say, like, look, it's been 60 days. You didn't pay us. We definitely need to collect this. We know you're going to some hard times. Potentially, maybe you can offer an installment. Why don't we stretch this? Is this going to help you? And you're kind of, oh my God, this is so helpful. Like, let's stretch it over the 5 months. We get paid $2,000. It's not perfect, right? You're losing some money because of inflation, and you don't have that cash in hand. But it's a business decision that you might make, and those things happen. Or maybe you offer a discount. Look, $10,000 yours. We really need to collect this. Would it help to give you one-time payment? Put a deadline on it. You have to pay it by the end of the week. 48 hours. One-time offer, 48 hours. Give us 80% of that money. We'll give you a 20% discount. Come Monday, no, that deal is gone. So create some kind of sense of urgency, right? But again, this is your business decision. I'm not advising you guys to know your business, but it can happen, right? I've seen it happen. And then the last course is, taking that legal action, right? You can say something like, hey, listen, we have a contract between us, and now it's out of my hand. We got to give it to the legal team. Again, be respectful, right? Don't threaten, don't yell. Just let we call it, take the emotions out. You have a contract in place. They didn't pay. This time you're going to bring the legal action. A lot of times, when Americans, and it's kind of like in the movies, when they hear like, okay, the legal action is going to happen, typically lawyers draft some kind of legal letter where they explain the seriousness if one party does not live up to their end of that contract. So we want to make sure that the legal gets involved, you're removed, right? And sometimes that's going to do the trick, right? They're going to say this is serious, and they're going to make a payment. And then maybe the last option, and I've seen this is happening now in Serbia too, but in US, this has been there forever. You have these collection agencies, right? Somebody comes and you have agencies, businesses that comes to you and say, look, if you have some uncollected debt, we are ready to make those, quote unquote, unpleasant calls for you and collect. Those deals are typically structured where they're like, oh, how big is that? $10,000. Okay, great. we're going to make some calls, but we want to have an agreement between us. We're going to collect 20 or 30%, whatever we collect. So if we collect $10,000, you're going to give us $3,000. Or they might just say, we're going to buy this outright from you, right, for $6,000 or $7,000. Again, it comes to a business decision. I would say if you do, I don't know, this is just, I don't have empirical evidence how many times this happens in delinquent customers. Excuse me, but from my experience, out of 10 deals that you do, maybe 9.5, you won't have any problems, but it happens, and you guys should know what is my recourse when that happens. Okay. All right. So we come to the end of this presentation, and I want to make sure that I give you some call to action. Again, I want you guys to start thinking about procurement. Even if you're not landing the first customer yet, start thinking what kind of documents you have in place. Have some kind of internal document, operational document that you can refer to if you land that US client, or you already have US clients, but some of these documents you're like, oh my God, I'm not sure I have this in place. Let me work on that. So look at your own situation and start building those internally. That's your call to action number one. And then call to action number two is that we will give you on the security side that third-party vendor risk assessment. If you're a SaaS company, listen to this. Absolutely, you should get it from started and start working on some of those things. And you can let me know if you have some questions regarding that. Again, my information, if you can bring that up, you guys can find me on LinkedIn. I'm very active, Aleks Paunic on LinkedIn. My email is alex.paunic@precogsecurity.com. And I'm pretty active on social media, so you can see some of my posts in Alexander303 on Instagram. Having said all that, I guess we're giving you a little bit of a time back here. We were slotted for 1 hour. It's actually 53 minutes into it. So what I'm going to do now is going to ask you guys, first of all, I want to thank you. I see people coming and going, and I see people are active on the chat. First of all, I want to thank you for your patience and for your attention. Hopefully this was valuable to you. And then I will ask you to, if you want to stretch, if you want to walk around, want to take a bio break, do it for the next 3 minutes. We're going to go back live in 3 minutes, and I'm going to read some of the questions that we have, and hopefully that's going to bring additional value to you. Again, thank you, hvala, and I'll talk to you in 3 minutes. All right, back as promised, 180 seconds, 3 minutes. And this is actually, I want to take time to for everybody to join me to wish well to Vukašin Stojkov. This is usually reserved for that fireside chat. Unfortunately, Vukašin seems to be, going through some COVID situation, and we wish him well. I'm pretty sure he's going to be okay. But if you guys did follow our events in the past, this is where Vukašin would sit down with me and ask me questions. But we wish him well. Hopefully for the next event, he's going to be there. I think he's an incredible part of this show, and we always got a good feedback when there's Vukašin and he's asking me questions and challenging me a little bit, and we challenge each other. So I think it's becoming a part of the show. But having said that, the show must go on, as we say in the United States, and I will try to answer some of these questions, hopefully provide you more value. We got some questions from the audience. I'm thinking this might take another 15, 20 minutes, no longer than that. So if you guys want to stick around for 15 minutes, there's going to be additional value to you guys to answer some of these questions. So I will start first with Marco. Marco, thanks a lot. Shout out to Marco. Hopefully you're sticking around. And he asked a really good question. I actually get that all the time, where people ask me, hey, Alex, do you think it's better to have a company in Serbia or to open in the US from Serbia, right? And my answer is, depends on your business. The quick answer, the short answer is yes. It's always going to be easier to do business and helpful if you have an entity in US. If you're growing, at one point, you're going to have to make that decision. Like I said, typically what I see from the companies, they open a C Corp in Delaware. And this is what I see from the SaaS product companies they're trying to position themselves to raise capital. Some reason venture capitalists just love the idea that you have a C Corp in Delaware. They know the laws and whatnot. But, things are changing a little bit or a lot in the United States. We're seeing Florida, Texas, a lot of these southern states that have favorable tax laws are actually, attracting a lot of companies. So actually, I heard quite a few companies from Europe are opening just straight up entities in Florida or Texas. The short answer is yes, but the longer answer is, at what point do you want to open, right? Maybe you can set up a milestone where you have certain revenue and you're ready to do that, or you have in a pipeline potentially a large client, a big client. I would say that's a probably good time to consider and make a business decision. You know what? I want to put myself in the best position to win this deal. I'm going to have probably a business entity in US because it's just going to be easier operationally. Invoicing, laws, and you know what? Marketing side too. I heard a lot of companies when they land a big client, a lot of times what happens is they had the US entity, even though engineering is here. It just gives that, there's a slang, warm fuzzy to the US client. Hey, I'm actually dealing with the US entity here. I do understand the engineering is done overseas in Serbia, but I like the idea that operationally, I'm going to be dealing with the US entity. So short answer, yes. Long answer, depends on what time, right? So you're going to have to make a business decision. And Marco, feel free to reach out to me, Aleks Paunic at LinkedIn, and we can chat a little bit more about that. Okay, next question from Chica DJ, Georgia maybe. Who can help me with filing out the W-8 form? I mentioned W-8, if you're an individual freelancer, you struck a deal with a US company, super easy to fill out. I guess the question is, what does it mean to file? You fill it out and you send it to your customer. You don't send it to the IRS. You send it to the customer so they have it on file when their American Internal Revenue Service, IRS, you guys might have heard of that, come to them and they want to look at the books. So you send it to the client. W-8 Ben E, I would definitely suggest to have a lawyer or legal look at it. For both, you want to still have somebody, with the legal and tax expertise to look at it. But from my experience, W-8 Ben for individual freelancer, fairly easy, one page. For W-8 Ben entity, it's going to take a little time. Probably want to talk to the tax or legal expert. Okay, next question from Selena Kurik. Hey, yeah, Selena, what are the things that are most important in vendor assessment risk, and what are some of the things that are not as strict? So we're talking about security, right? And Selena wants to know what can she pay attention to, because it's an extensive list, right? Where should you put your resources and focus, and what can you put you in the best position to pass? I'm pretty sure that's what Selena is asking, because a lot of clients ask me that same thing. You get 100 questions from your client, and you have maybe a week or two to answer those. So you want to be like, hey, where should I pay attention to? we have a similar case right now in PreCog Security, and I can tell you that every security control is important, but Selena is right? Some are critical, some are high, some are maybe medium. The most critical ones are business continuity and disaster recovery, and data governance and data protection. Meaning your client, especially if you have a SaaS product, right? They will want to know, hey, you're touching my customer's data. I want to know how you're protecting their data. I want to know what happens if you get attacked. And don't tell me you're not going to get attacked. Everybody says that everybody gets attacked. You might have a breach today or tomorrow. What is your business continuity? What is your disaster recovery? For the service providers, I actually talked to a few Serbian companies, IT outsourcing. The background checks are becoming incredibly important, okay? So if you're an IT outsourcing company, start investing in the background checks. And start investing in those background checks that are aligned and approved in US. Before you know it, even if you say, well, Alex, we had this client for 5 years, they never asked us that, they will come back and ask you. The security compliance is getting stricter and stricter in US, and especially when they're US companies dealing with a foreign entity. But even if it's a US entity, the vendor risk assessment is given to every company, even if it's a San Francisco company, large client, Facebook says, hey, I want to do business with a startup from San Francisco. They will still ask them to do the same thing. Everybody is following the same rules. Okay, so again, Selena, I would say business continuity, disaster recovery, data protection. And then if you're an IT service provider, definitely invest in the background checks of your engineers. Great. Bifrost Serbia, hi, shout out to Bifrost. How to make a project proposal in a more informal setting where a client does not provide vendor with project proposal template. Okay, so I did mention, so it's a couple of things here. I did mention that request for proposal, request for quote, sometimes you're not gonna see that. You're just gonna deal directly with the client. I just want to let you know that those are often given. Even if you have, conversation with the client and they're like, yeah, we're very interested in your services. However, we have a formal RFP in place. Let me give it to you so you go through the proper channels, right? It happens, I would say out of 10 deals that you're gonna do, a few are gonna be done through the RFP or RFQ. I guess the question is, can you do this in an informal setting? And yes, Americans love to talk business in informal settings too. But I would say even if you're starting some conversations and you're getting some firm handshakes and some committal in informal setting, hey, we really want to use your service, we want to use your product, you're always going to have to go through the formal process, right? So you have to remember getting those ducks in a row, the slang, getting those documents in place. Even if your relationship started in an informal setting, even if you struck a deal in a restaurant, or those things happen. Absolutely, you met somebody at a soccer game or golfing, they will still say, "Hey, I definitely want to do business with you, but let me give it to my internal operational people," and they're going to start the process. So there's no avoidance of getting those ducks in a row. The only thing is, sometimes there's not going to be an RFP and RFQ. You're just going to deal directly with the customer, but you're still going to have to do that supplier form or W-9 or W-8 Ben. All right. Okay, so some of the things that should be included and some of the things that can be skipped. I am thinking that that's referring to the previous question, the project proposal template. Okay, so let's answer it like that. From the project proposal template, what can be skipped, what cannot be skipped? I would say the number one thing, if it's, again, remember guys, request for proposal, you're going to have to, pretty much explain how you're going to manage the project. You're going to have to work on timelines. You're going to have to, spend some time. It's a little bit of a business plan. Talk about the material, talk about the backgrounds of your employees. But I would say the scope is super important, and the timeline and the price, right? So those are probably the three things. Make sure that the scope is defined. Make sure that the timeline is defined too, and make sure that the cost is defined as well. You cannot avoid that. So definitely work on that. And how long it should be, it just depends from deal to deal, right? It doesn't have to be long. I mean, those three things, it can be a couple of paragraphs, but you will definitely have to spend time internally making sure that, hey, if this deal happens, can we deliver that in that kind of time and for that kind of cost within that kind of scope and time frame and framework. Okay, so Marco is saying thank you. So hopefully, Marco, that answers your question. Again, I'm available on LinkedIn if anybody wants to reach out to me, Aleks Paunic, and we are going to Aleks Paunic on LinkedIn, alex.paunic at precog Instagram, Alexander303. Again, 2 calls to action. Start thinking about your business, like Marco was saying here. Hey, is it going to be life easier for me if I open an entity in US? If it's not time to open US the entity and you want to do business with Srbia, you can absolutely do that. Make sure you put yourself in the best position, with this document. Start thinking about that before you get your first client, or even if you got your client in US, make sure that you have these documents in place. The number 2 call to action, we will give you that third-party vendor security risk assessment. So this is a great security tool for you to start building security. Even if you got nothing, you can. I always encourage people, you do not have to spend a lot of money. You're just going to take time and a little bit of focus to start building some security controls. They're going to come in handy for, number 1, minimizing the risk of the attack, and number 2, getting you ready for that procurement because your client's going to ask it. And then number 3, call to action, we're going to wish for caution, speedy recovery. And we are going to announce next date for the next event, where we're going to talk a little bit about the business culture. It's going to be a little bit more laxed. We're not going to, quote unquote, bore you with documents, but we will, again, talk to you about a little bit about the business culture and events and how you can make the most out of it, with American customer, whether it's in the US or potentially even here in Serbia. So with that being said, thank you again. Hvala na pažnji, or thank you for attention. And we will talk to you soon. Have a great rest of the evening.